Welcome back to the Kiwi Wedding Podcast. My name is Lydia and I am a wedding photographer based in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. If you're not already, give us a follow on Instagram at the Kiwi Wedding Podcast, and you can follow me at Lydia Rachel Photo. Today on the podcast we have the lovely Charlotte. I was super excited to chat with her, and I had followed her for a long time as she used to be a wedding photographer herself. She now works in more of the design space, but I always admired her work, and I knew when I saw her own wedding pop up that it would be great to chat to her, having that perspective of working in the industry and then being a bride herself. And I was not wrong. There is so much amazing advice and great tips in this one. I know you're going to love it so much. She chats through some of the struggles she had when planning, the journey to finding her dress, things that surprised her even after having worked in the space for so long. And yeah, like I said, just so many incredible tips. So make sure you listen right through to this one and enjoy episode 23 with Charlotte. Hi, Charlotte. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Hi. Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. A little bit nervous.
You're going to be great. I'm so excited to chat. To start off with, I might actually get you to give a little bit of context because you are recently married, but you also used to work in the wedding industry as well. So maybe if you can tell us a little bit about that, how you got into it, and yeah, sort of your journey to where you are now.
Sure. Well, kia ora everyone. My name is Charlotte. I'm based down in Otago, Christchurch. So, yeah, I used to be a wedding photographer. By day, I'm a graphic designer. I work as the design director for a brand studio that we have studios in Auckland and Christchurch. So that's kind of my Monday to Friday. And then when I was studying quite a few years ago now, I picked up photography as a hobby, and that very naturally progressed into somehow finding myself in the wedding world, as you do. And I just spent about 6 years of my life doing that as like a side hustle, which I loved, but it became quite full on near the end there, just with working a full time job as well. And ultimately had to kind of make a call on what I was going to like fully commit to. But I loved my time in the industry. I think weddings as a whole are just like such a beautiful time in people's lives. And it was so cool to just meet wonderful people from all over New Zealand. I got to travel to some really cool places with it. And I think I learned a lot about myself during that process. So there was a lot of kind of transferable skills into other parts of my life. And it actually proved relatively handy when planning my own wedding. So, yeah, that is me. I still have some really great friends in the industry. It's just such a beautiful community to be a part of. Yeah.
Oh, so cool. I used to love following along with your work. So beautiful. And yeah, it's bittersweet that people can't book you anymore. But yeah, I'm sure all your
Thank you.
couples are stoked they got in with you while they could.
I feel like there's so much talent in New Zealand particularly in photography. We just have the best landscape ever to work with, and so it was hard to leave, but I do feel like there were so many wonderful people and options out there. I'm sure it wasn't a big loss.
Aw. And yeah, a cool perspective to have when it came to planning your own wedding, for sure, to have seen a bit of the behind the scenes. And yeah, I'm sure that gave you a lot of insight. But yeah, to go back and start with, I'll get you to tell me a bit about you and your partner, how you guys met, and yeah, your life together.
Sure, we met a long time ago actually. Ben and I were actually the old high school sweethearts. So he was the year above me in school, but we were actually in the same graphics class in his final year, and I was year 12 at the time. And he was also a mutual family friend of one of my best mates. So we naturally bumped into each other, and yeah, it kind of hit it off really. He asked me to the ball. I said yes, and we've been together ever since. I was 16, he was 17. So we've been together for, I think it must be 14 years now. It's really cute. He like took me out on this 17-year-old first date, which was picking me up in his Nissan Toronto from my parents' place and taking me up to kind of the Canterbury High Country, and we had like Subway in the back of his truck. It was like winter at the time, so we went ice skating on like a little lake up there at the time, and then yeah, the rest is history. It still makes me laugh thinking about how that day played out, because he was dropping me home and my mum invited him in for a roast meal for dinner, and then he just wouldn't leave. And we were like staying up watching a movie on the couch, and I think it was like 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning, and I had to like sneak into my mum and stepdad's bedroom and be like, what do I do? He's not leaving. And they were like, oh, just get him a blanket out of the cupboard and he can sleep on the couch. So he actually stayed the night on our first date as teenagers, which still makes me chuckle. But pretty much from that point on, we have been together ever since. So he works as a builder. He works for a company that kind of specialises in energy efficient, high performing architectural homes. So he's really on board with that, and currently is building us our home as well in his spare time, which there's not a lot of that. Yeah, and he as a person is kind of more of the cool, calm, collected. He's a little bit more introverted than I am. He's really great with people, but kind of being around people drains his social battery, whereas I'm a bit more of like the loud, extroverted. I love socializing, love being around people. And so, yeah.
So cool, such a cute story. And yeah, it's like you've kind of grown up together, been together for years. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty special.
Can you tell us a bit about the proposal story and how all that went down?
Sure. Oh my gosh. Like, firstly, it was a very long overdue proposal in terms of like our family and friend circles. We were kind of that couple that were like the butt of everybody's teasing and jokes of like, hurry up, when's it going to happen? You guys have been together forever. And my friends used to crack me up, would, be out for dinner or something like that. And I'd sort of been up in the corner and try and put some pressure on him. But ultimately, like, he's very much the kind of person that he decides things on his terms and when he's ready. And so we just wanted to, I think, be in a position where we could actually do the wedding that we wanted to do. And it was quite important, I think, particularly for us to like own a home first and do some travel and, tick some of those life stages off before we thought about a wedding. And we just know, I think, with my being in the industry, I was able to have a bit of an understanding of costs and things like that. And we just weren't at a stage earlier on where we could kind of afford to do what we would want. So after 12 years of being together, he finally made it a priority to want to proposed to me. And it's quite a funny story in the end, because there were a few failed attempts which I didn't know about until afterwards. But essentially, he, in terms of like a ring situation, I think he felt quite a lot of pressure with. I'm quite fussy in terms of what I like, and he is so just such a chiller, real Kiwi bloke. Would have no idea how to kind of tackle that. And so what I'd actually said to him is, don't even worry about a ring. We can design a ring together once we're engaged, kind of thing. But he had actually had a ring under the bed for 6 months, which was, we call it like a placeholder ring. He had remembered that I'd loved this cocktail style ring from a place up in Auckland, and he had bought it and put it under the bed, and had decided to propose with that. And then we would get one made when we got engaged. So um, a few of the failed attempts kind of looked like a waterfall walk one day where I was being snobby and probably didn't want to wear a jacket, and he decided to have the ring in his jacket pocket, and then I got cold and he had to give me his jacket. So I was actually wearing the ring in the jacket pocket at the time, and he was quite nervous about that. But then when we actually got to the waterfall, there were people there. He's very private, I'm quite private too, and he just decided, no, we need to be by ourselves. So that was one of the failed attempts. um, the second one was we had some family photos done for my mum's, I think it was my mum's birthday or something, and we'd organised as siblings to kind of do a family photo shoot with one of my friends, Susie, down here. And he had brought the ring along to the family photo shoot, and he'd said to me, we were just getting some photos of us together, and he was like, oh, like, what do you think it would you want to get engaged here or something? And I was like, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. And he was like, oh, okay then. And I had no idea that he would have done it if I'd said yes, and had the opportunity for some photos and stuff of it. But ultimately, how it sort of played out in the end was it was our 12-year anniversary. We decided to go back up to the spot where we went on our first date, which was kind of, it's in the Lake Coleridge area in Canterbury, and it was, I think I did have a feeling that something was going to happen because he was very specific about wanting to go on a particular day, even though the weather looked better on the other day. And we got up in the morning and told his parents where we were going, and we live with his parents at the moment while we're building our house. And his mother was just the most adorable, flustered. She just like was so hopeful that it would happen that day, and she started running around the kitchen and packing us a like a little bag to with some cookies and some Milo and stuff. Like, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's making this so obvious that she thinks this is going to happen today. So we drove up there. The road was closed. Ben drove around the closed road sign. And I was like, oh, I think he's determined something's happening today. And then we did like about a 45-minute walk around to a lake called Lake Ida. And honestly, we didn't see a single soul all day. It was this like winter, foggy, cold day, not a person around, and there were just native birds. And we arrived at the lake, and I just remember like looking down and being like, whoa, this is so beautiful. And then I kind of was expecting him, I think, to do it there, and he didn't. And then we walked around the other side, set up a little picnic, had our Milo and our little cookies, and we were probably there for a good 45 minutes. And then I started overthinking. I was like, it's not happening. I've made a big thing of this, and it's not even going to be a thing. And then I was like, oh well, let that go. And he got up and walked across to the lake edge. And then he turned around and looked at me, and he was like, you look really content. And I was like, I am. And then he came over, and he was like, do you want your anniversary present? And I was like, oh, did you get me a present? And he got a ring out of his pocket, and he said, will you marry me? And I said no. But I was joking, obviously. And I reckon it was the weirdest kind of sensation to have something highly anticipated come along, and then it finally happened, and it was kind of like this weird, like, whoa, I don't quite know how to feel. And it probably wasn't until 5 or 10 minutes later where it was like really sunk in. I was just like very emotional and excited, and I wanted to know all the details of how this had like come about. And so we spent the walk back kind of talking about all his failed attempts. There were a couple more in there, but talking about those and how we wanted to tell the people that we loved. And yeah, that was probably something I didn't think about a lot. You know, you kind of focus on the proposal, but actually that flow on time afterwards was probably the highlight of being able to tell our families and our friends and surprise them and like share in that celebratory time with them was just something I like. It's one of my favorite memories about that whole scenario. Um, and yeah, we just have the best group of people who made such a big thing of it, and we celebrated kind of all week. And it was one of my best friends who was a bridesmaid. She was working in the city at the time, not far from me, and I just like went to work to surprise her and tell her. And then like I just had this thing in my head that I wanted to tell people in person. So yeah, I was darting all over the city that week telling people.
Yeah, so exciting to just like share with everyone after and celebrate. Love that.
Yeah, it was the best.
And so you had obviously been to a lot of weddings at this point. So were you, did you already have like a vision and specific like style in mind of what you wanted for your wedding? And yeah, where did you go from there with choosing your venue, all of that.
That's so funny. Like, I feel like lots of people would say to me, knowing that I used to be a photographer, were like, "Oh, you must know exactly what you want to do for your wedding."
Everyone says that.
No, which I didn't until we actually got engaged and we started to talk about it and think about that. But yeah, I think one thing I did notice, like being within the industry for a few years, is things do change and stuff. I didn't want to get too set on a dream necessarily because I just know that yeah, things can change. And yeah, I had no idea about a dress or anything like that. So yeah, pretty quickly after getting engaged, I think the discussions of where we would get married were like kind of the first things. And we very quickly landed on Wānaka as our spot. Like we go down there pretty much every summer, if not more, during the year. One of my best friends was so fortunate to have access to her family back down there. So we just spend a lot of time down there in general. And we loved the idea that having a wedding outside of Christchurch would mean that our families and friends could travel and kind of make a weekend or a week of it, which was so cool because it actually ended up happening. It was also somewhere that I felt quite excited to get married in terms of like I hadn't shot a lot of weddings down there. I'd done a couple in Queenstown, but I really had in my head that I wanted somewhere I hadn't photographed it before. So it was like a prerequisite. And then I think in terms of like a general vibe, we really pictured an outdoor wedding with mountains where I just love the hills. They're timeless. It's really reflective of New Zealand and the South Island in particular. And I don't know, that's just what I had in my head. And Ben was the same. We decided on autumn because we're both run a bit hot, and so a midsummer wedding probably wasn't really up our alley. And we also had like the craziest summer of weddings and events lining up already. So we sort of tacked on to the end of the season and at the end of March. When we had like initial discussions around like what we wanted or what we visualized for our wedding, we had like this idea in our heads, and we both agreed that it would be just so cool to create a super relaxed and comfortable environment where our guests could come along and they would be enjoying the sunshine, hopefully, with an afternoon cocktail in hand and have live music playing and share a banquet style dinner and then dance under the stars. Like that was kind of the rough flow that we were working towards in terms of an environment or a vibe that we wanted to create. And so I think when we were looking around venues, when we arrived at Dublin Bay, I think we both immediately felt there was something there that we could work with and just could picture how that feeling would come to life there. It was just the most gorgeous little private spot in Wānaka. It's quite a blank canvas venue, so it's got two sort of levels to it where on the top level is just plain grass with a beautiful lookout over the lake and the hills, and that's sort of like the ceremony spot. But then down, you kind of go down some stairs, and there's a big grass area with a stone fireplace and a built-in bar, and the rest is just grass, so you can bring in a marquee and things. So it just it kind of ticked all the boxes. We were able to bring things in and create an event that suited us, but it also had like some logistical wins. Like there were toilets already there, water hooked up, a bar. So yeah, it just was a nice mix of that. I think like what we really tried to strive for was creating this really cool mix of it being like a fun and relaxed wedding, but that also meant something that was really a well executed, beautiful event that our guests would arrive and be like, wow, this is like really well thought out. And I'm hoping that's what we did. I feel like we did, and it was just yeah, so fun. And I also had what I found quite helpful was at the start. I had these three keywords based on the chats that we'd had. It was like, what are these core pillars of our wedding that like will help us guide us into our decision making? And those words were emotive, fun, and stylish. So it kind of spoke to like on an emotional level, I really wanted us to be, you know, embracing doing really meaningful vows and not like rushing through a ceremony or anything like that, and having key people involved. And then from a fun point of view, it was things like music and food and just like a laid back environment. And then I think the designer and creative in me just ultimately wanted something that looked really beautiful as well. So those were kind of our three main parts. And I guess stylistically, they ended up being sort of went for a contemporary chic kind of vibe. But I was really conscious that I didn't want our um, wedding to date too much. So, like, how you could still achieve quite a timeless look that we can look back on years to come at photos and things, or like if we have children, our children can look at and, you know, it's not cringe. So, yeah, that was kind of what we worked to. I'm being a visual person. I very quickly like got on the computer and was making a mood board basically to guide the um, yeah, aesthetic of the wedding and how it would bring in florals and things like that.
It's so cool for people to hear about. I think that's a really good idea, like thinking of three words or, yeah, like the pillars you say to sort of help guide you and all your decisions. So you've kind of talked about a few things there, but what were the most important elements or top priorities when it came to like vendors and stuff? I'm gonna say photography and design maybe, but
I mean, yeah, you're not wrong. I I actually, if I'm being really honest, I found this quite hard because I found everything a priority, which was hard because we were definitely working to a budget and I just wanted all the things. But I think what we did do when we got engaged was sit down and we each said what our top three kind of spend items that we felt were important to each of us were. And so Ben's were like venue slash location, food and drinks, and he actually said photography, which surprised me, but I think he just knew the importance of it based on me having done it as well. And I think mine was similar, but maybe instead of like the food and booze aspect, I thought what we were wearing was more important in terms of spend, or well, actually, food and booze is quite a big portion of the budget. So that in terms of priority, I would say, yeah, I thought what we were wearing was quite a priority as well. In terms of photography, like Danelle was actually the first vendor we contacted out of the entire process, and we basically booked our wedding date around her availability. And I just loved, I think she's one photographer that I sort of have a personal connection with her. I went to, when I first started photography, I went to one of her workshops to kind of learn from her. And then I just love her look and her personality, everything about her. I just think is she's such a beautiful person, and I didn't find it hard to choose. I just knew that I wanted her, and so I reached out to her straight away, and that was awesome. I didn't necessarily want to allow in the budget for like a full on wedding video, but another good friend of mine through the industry, Anna, has been doing these beautiful Super 8 wedding films. And I just asked her if she would want to come down and just do film and not photography. And she was actually booked at the time, but luckily, I don't know what happened, but she had the cancellation on our date. And so, like 6 months in, she messaged and said, I'm now free and I would love to come down. And so, for me, that was just so awesome to have a photography and video duo there that were people that I loved in general. But also, they would probably be my top two picks if I was getting married for photography anyway. So, it was just the most perfect outcome. Um, One important thing we both decided on quite early on was that we felt it would be important to have a coordinator. And I'm not sure if there's like, yeah, what the difference between kind of full wedding planning or styling and coordination, but we sort of booked in Alex down in Wānaka for a styling and coordination package. And the reason we did that was we really didn't want to be asking our kind of friends and family on the wedding week slash day to be doing all the setup and pat down for us. It's just so much work. We really wanted our guests to be able to relax and enjoy it. So I think that's where wedding coordinators and planners just are invaluable. Is like, not only was she able to give us guidance of getting married out of town and what the good local vendors and stuff to use would be, but it was just that logistical element on the wedding week, taking over comms with vendors to kind of manage the logistics side of things, and then like the whole wedding was set up, and we didn't really have to worry about that. And I just, yeah, I would recommend that to anybody, in terms of a priority. It just saves so much stress. I'm going to list off a lot of priorities here, but the next one I felt quite important from like a more of a stylistic kind of lens was florals. And I just, ever since shooting, I just always felt, and this could be my personal preference, but they just stand out so much, and they speak so much for themselves, that you don't need a lot else if the flowers are really beautiful. So I absolutely fell in love with Little Botanica's work down in, I think she's based out of Queenstown, but travels to Wānaka quite a lot. And she's just like the most incredible, talented florist. And I just said to her, I think she had the mood board of our wedding, and it was basically free reign from there. I just tried not to like overdo that process, and it's so dependent on what's in season and what's available. And you know, we had the week of the wedding, I think initially we were supposed to have some kind of wedding flowers for our bouquets, but she actually couldn't get them at the auction. They weren't available. So we just had to roll with the next best option. And I just love that I could trust her to do that. And she absolutely nailed it. I was blown away and loved it. And yeah, that's kind of was some of our top priorities. One thing I think that was ended up being a bit of a bonus that we didn't really think about or know about when we were planning was our venue was actually a BYO venue, which was so great for being able to kind of save costs on booze. But it also meant that we decided to do like a cocktail hour, and we could bring in our own spirits and ingredients for that, and the bar staff were able to make Moscow mules and a gin bramble for really reasonable pricing. And it was just such a hit with the guests, and ended up being a real highlight. And we thought they might last a couple of hours, but they ended up lasting most of the night. And it was so fun just seeing like mum and dad and running around with cocktail in hand, and everyone being really happy and enjoying a cocktail in the sun. So that ended up being kind of a nice little surprising element there as well.
So cool. Love a custom cocktail, and so much great advice there. Handing over sort of the reins to a coordinator on the day, like super helpful and really good one for people to consider. And yeah, I think you just have so much visual eye, like in terms of the florals and everything. So yeah, choosing the right vendors and then yeah, executing it to all fit into your vision. That's so cool. So can you tell me a bit about yeah, both your wedding outfits, and yeah, did you have an idea of like the dress you wanted for a while? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I had no idea what I would wear. And I absolutely loved the dress that I ended up wearing, but I will say it was a bit of a journey to get there in terms of like the process of finding one and getting one made. And it was probably the only part of the wedding that I actually felt quite stressed about, and I learned a lot about myself at the time. So I'm super happy to share kind of how that all came about, because I I think I was a little bit disheartened at the beginning that I didn't get like all the good feels about wedding dresses and things. So I'll start by saying I actually chose to embark on the dress, like choosing my dress by myself, which is probably quite a non-traditional or not the usual way to do it. And I think, like looking back, probably the reasons were I have the most beautiful, kind, beautiful friends, and so it wasn't a fear of like them being involved in that process necessarily, but I think I wasn't super confident in myself at the time, and I was quite maybe a bit embarrassed that like you go into a boutique and they only carry a very limited range of sizes. And I think I was a bit nervous or embarrassed that I might not fit what was there. And also, I don't know if I was quite ready to be up for a bunch of opinions at that stage when I actually just didn't know at all what I was wanting, and probably more the kind of person who feels confident enough to decide what I do and don't like, and then maybe show people at a later date. So I just had this kind of mix of things, which meant that it just felt right to start that journey by myself first and get a little bit across it before I involved people. And I felt quite guilty about that at times, but equally, I think that was like the right decision. I started out by trying a few dresses on. I went up to Auckland for a couple of work trips, so I used those trips to go and try on some dresses up there, and I also tried some on down here in Christchurch. But I think what I found is that a lot I felt didn't suit my like body shape or type necessarily, or that the ones that did or that were maybe built for more curvier bodies weren't stylistically what I was looking for. And like how do you kind of make this thing in the middle where it's like both flattering but it also makes you feel really good in terms of a look as well. So I think that was a bit hard to go into a place and them to be like, oh well, we don't actually, you probably won't fit the sample sizes, but we can like clip it at the back and it will give you an idea of what it looks like. So um, I went through a bit of a headspace at that time where I was like, I don't like myself because yeah, I just felt that it wasn't a super inclusive experience necessarily, and I can't help but think of all the people that it would have probably had a similar experience or that are excluded from some of those experiences. And I didn't go to every place, so I'm not saying it's reflective of every place. And actually, I had the most amazing experience with Izzy from Paper Swan down here in Christchurch. She is honestly like such an angel. And I went in there by myself, and I expressed that I was a bit nervous, and she was just wonderful. She was very honest that she didn't think that any of those dresses were the ones for me. Like she didn't try to sell me anything that wasn't right. And I actually showed her at the time, there was one I had saved on my um, Instagram or Pinterest or something of a style that I was quite drawn to. And I showed her a picture and she was like, oh my gosh, you should absolutely get that made. And when you do, come back and show me and you can do a try on with your friends and stuff. And we actually did do that, which is such a cool little roundabout story. But I can say a little bit more about that later. But yeah, so anyway, that kind of leads me to going down a bespoke path. I had this dress saved for years on my kind of Instagram saved, and I just kept going back to it. It was a low kind of V-neck with a cap sleeve, and I think I knew it would suit my body shape and size, and I'm slightly bigger busted, so I wanted something that would be really like flattering and comfortable on the day. So kept coming back to this dress, and then I was scrolling Instagram in the lounge one day and I saw that a bride up in the North Island had worn a very similar style. So I messaged her and I was like, oh, you look so beautiful on your wedding day. Like, have you considered selling your dress? And she was like, oh no, I haven't. But I think I'd be up for it. And she ended up couriering it down to Christchurch for me to try on, which I just think, thank you to her. That is so kind, and like not many people would probably be up for up for that, but she let me try it on. It didn't quite fit me right. I was a bit bigger in the bust and needed a bit more support and things, but it was such a stunning dress, and I think that just gave me the confidence to be like, right, I need to get something like this made, but it's for me and my body type. And so I chose to work with Vinca in Auckland to do a custom dress. How that worked was I just used trips that I would be out there for work and used those trips to go in and get measured and do fittings. But it was actually much less than I thought it would be. Like, I think I was in maybe 4 times total, like one for measurement or consult, then measurements, and then like 2 fittings before a final fitting. So it was very achievable actually being out of town, and just managing that in with some trips for work. The downside I think of it is that you actually only see your dress, like in my case, 2 weeks before the wedding. So I had no idea kind of what the finished outcome would be like. So you really are, you know, you need to trust the people that are making it. And yeah, it was pretty nervous going in for that final fitting to see how it would all come together. But thankfully, I really liked it. And what I did end up doing is, as I mentioned before, with Izzy down in Paper Swan, when I brought it back to Christchurch with me, I thought I'd flick her an email and just be like, hey, I know you mentioned this, like, not sure if you were fully serious, but I actually went ahead and got this made. Would you like to see it? And she was just the biggest honey. She was like, come on Saturday, bring who you want. She did the bubbles, she did the, yeah, reveal, and she put me in the dress, and then my 4 bridesmaids and mother-in-law and mum were there, and we kind of made a thing of it and went out for dinner afterwards, and I just felt so excited to wear it after that. So yeah, I don't regret kind of going down that journey by myself. I still had that really beautiful moment with the girls and stuff afterwards. I will say that like getting the bespoke dress made ended up being more than what were hoping to spend on a wedding dress, but um, despite Ben being very, very chill and saying that he would absolutely just marry me in a paper bag, he was so cute throughout that process and just said that he wanted me to feel the absolute best. And he even offered to come to a few fittings with me, knowing that I was really anxious and nervous about it. And so he just wanted me to have the dress that made me feel good, and we agreed to sell it afterwards because it ended up costing a bit more than we hoped. Yeah. It's very hard not to, like, honestly, there's so many styles that I'm like, they're beautiful. Like, it's so hard to pick something. For Ben and the boys, we just wanted something that looked really timeless and classic. So very quickly landed on black suits, and he's like a bit of a sweater and runs a bit hot. So he wanted to purchase one that was merino, and that would allow, like, the fabric would breathe so that he didn't get too hot. But we just hired the rest of the groomsmen suits. And then for the girls, I we did a lot of DIY elements in the end. But I'd seen these amazing Camilla and Mark dresses online, but they were just so pricey, and there was no way that we could make that work. So we ended up, I bought some fabric and we got them made through like a friend of a friend. And I just loved them in the end. I just had this picture in my head that because my dress was quite full on and detailed and textured, that the girls would be in these full length kind of minimal straight kind of gowns. And so once I got approval from them that they would all be happy kind of wearing that, we just went and got them made, and it was such a fun process.
Nice for them to have something fully tailored for their size as well.
Yeah, my sister ended up wearing her bridesmaid's dress like just a couple of weeks ago to the races, and just restyled it with like yeah, hairdo and a black handbag and things, and she looks so cute.
Cool for people to hear your whole journey with your dress as well. I think that a lot of brides will relate to that. So thanks for sharing that. How was the whole choosing process with your bridal party, and who did you have in it? Did you find that quite easy?
Luckily, yes. um, yeah, that was one of the kind of no-brainer decisions in the end. For the most part, Ben had his 2 best mates and his younger brother, and then I had 3 of my best girl mates and my younger sister. So actually, initially, I didn't ask my sister, and it was not necessarily for wanting to have like even-numbered bridal parties, but more we were just still in that phase of trying to figure out how we would involve key people, and I hadn't quite decided how Lily would be involved at that point. But ultimately, like, I couldn't really picture her not being up there with us, and it was actually probably one of the best decisions we made in terms of like a meaningful decision with the wedding. I think she was just so thrilled to be asked, and it's actually brought us a lot closer. We've got eight years between us in terms of an age gap. So she was really involved and got to like meet and hang out with my friends a lot more. And it just was the coolest time. She was so cute leading up to the wedding. Like she would think the week of I had like a message every day into my inbox with a photo from our childhood. And it was like to my sister who taught me how to read, and it would be like a photo of us, me reading her a book when she was like a toddler and stuff like that. So I just honestly can't imagine that she wasn't a bridesmaid in the end. So yeah, I'm so glad I asked her. One thing we didn't do was have a maid of honor or a best man. And I think, I don't know, we just didn't feel super strongly about needing to have someone. I think it's like if there's a really clear person, then that can be a really nice way to show them how special they are to you. But we just didn't, and we just wanted everybody to be kind of involved. And it actually worked out quite well. We gave people different roles. So, like in the bridesmaids, there was Natalie, Lexi, Leisha, and my sister Lily. And for example, Natalie, who is our absolute food queen and ultimate chef, she was kind of in charge of cooking us a beautiful dinner the night before the wedding. And then I had her sit beside me at the reception. And then Lexi, she's my kind of stylistic creative queen. So her kind of job was around making sure that my dress was sitting good during the ceremony, and that all the kind of elements were looking good. And she stood beside me at the ceremony. And then Leash is just like this amazing, cool as a cucumber, very rational thinker. And she was our timekeeper and kind of just like made sure everything was running to time. She drove me to the wedding in the end. And so I just had this beautiful mix of people to be around.
So cool. Nice to give them all special roles as well. And yeah, I feel like there doesn't need to be this like hierarchy necessarily. So that's a cool way to do it. And what about the guest list? How did you find that? Was that quite a difficult process narrowing it down?
I think not as much as we were anticipating, which was kind of nice in the end. I think time and time again, you just hear that is like the hardest or one of the hardest parts that people find during the planning process. And we do come from quite large families and things, so we were like anticipating that it was going to be a bit of a tricky decision. But I think when we did our initial sit down and like everyone who popped to mind wrote them down, it was only around like the 130, 140 number. And we were like, okay, that's actually not too bad. We knew we wanted to sit more around 115. And so we kind of came and revisited it a few times over the months and just kind of swapped things in and around. And we decided not to do cousins on two of our family side because there's a lot of cousins. Whereas on my dad's side, I have four, and we've kind of grown up quite closely together. So that was probably one of the harder decisions, is choosing not to do all of our cousins. That was kind of what would push the numbers a bit higher. But yeah, I think we had 113 on the day in the end, and invited 115, I think. And I think one of the best things we did was actually, I sort of mentioned it before, but revisiting the guest list over the space of a few months was really good. Like, I think rather than just writing down the list and then sending out the save the dates, it gave us time to see how like new friendships were developing and ponder decisions that were maybe a little trickier. So I would recommend that to anybody if you've got the time to just like allow yourself the space to sit on decisions. And we also invited people last minute. Like we had a few people not be able to come, and we were like, awesome. Like, well, so sad we can't, that you guys aren't coming, but like to give other people the call up. We just thought if we were in that position, like it's such an honor to go to a wedding, we would be so thrilled. And we've had that happen to us before, so we did the same and just filled those seats with people that were kind of sitting in the wings that we love.
That's great advice. Love that. And so, can you tell us about the big day? How did it go down? And yeah, any favorite moments?
Oh my gosh, like the whole week is quite like this happy blur of fun. Like it was just we actually all went down there. Our families went down there to Wānaka on either the Monday or the Tuesday, and our wedding was on the Friday, and we just made a thing of the whole week, which was so cool. Like in hindsight, I'm so glad we did that. On the Tuesday night, we had a family dinner at a Mexican restaurant in Wānaka, and so my family is a split family. My mum and dad separated when I was really young, so I've got two sides of the family there, and then Ben's family, who I've been part of for a long time. So we got everyone together for like a dinner, and it was really special. I've got like two little half siblings and then my other two half siblings that are older. So just bringing all of that group together and seeing how those interactions happen, it was really special. Um, and then on the Wednesday night, sort of the Wednesday, all the bridal parties started to arrive. So we did I think Ben went jet boating with the boys, and me and the girls went out to a restaurant for dinner and just had a girls' night. And the reason I did it on the Wednesday is I was just trying to anticipate, like, if any curveballs happened on the day before, that we weren't doing anything, locked into anything too big. And so did that on the Wednesday. And then the night before the wedding was more of our kind of chill, tick off some admin. Natalie made like this amazing lamb dish with like a beautiful salad, and the intention was to have a movie night and watch I think it was like Bridesmaids or something like that. But the night ended up being a bit of a flop because we ran out of hot water. So I ended up having a shower going around to Ben's accommodation and seeing him. I was really anxious, and I just like think I was looking for any excuse to go and see him. So I ended up background at their house for a shower. I had a really like funny tummy. I was excited. It was almost like anxious anticipation, but my tummy was so funny, and I like literally got no sleep. I was up and down in the bathroom all night, and yeah, it was. But then on the day, you kind of wake up. The weather was beautiful, which was it's always a relief. And it was, I loved, like, in terms of highlights, the morning getting ready with the girls was one of them. Like, it just was this wholesome, relaxed vibe. I had my hairdresser from Christchurch, Michelle, came down, and the makeup artist Cass was also from Christchurch, and I'd met them a few times before. So between having them there and Danelle and Anna shooting, it was just this really beautiful mix of people, and just created this really awesome energy, which I loved. And Mum ducked in and out in between getting her hair and makeup done, and she was on a bit of food for the morning, so it was really nice having her there. We then had to get to the wedding, which we hadn't really thought through the logistics super well on that part. We'd hired this little convertible car for like $300. And then, like, the night before, I was like, oh yeah, I probably don't want to drive 20 minutes to the venue in a convertible car when I've had my hair done in a veil necessarily. So we ended up taking my little grey Mazda to the wedding, and I drove that with Leash like the whole way there, and then met my dad at the driveway to hop in the convertible car. So it was quite entertaining, and I was very nervous on that drive there. But then the next thing that kind of sticks out to me is just that the ceremony as a whole, like, is just, I always loved it as a photographer, and I absolutely loved our own one as well. But just being able to like arrive there and see everybody seated, and like being standing kind of in the distance, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. My dad was just the most adorable blubbering mess. He was walking me up the aisle sniffling away, and I just, it was so much more emotional than I ever anticipated. Like, I'm quite an emotive person, and I was a bit nervous about being overly like crying, but it actually just wasn't a thing on the day. It was like happiness, emotion, like happy tears, and just seeing Ben for the first time was like honestly the most special thing. He was really actually the whole bridal party and stuff was super emotional, and it was just beautiful. Um, we did a couple of things differently for our ceremony, which I really loved. The celebrant that we chose to have a surprise ceremony. So what we'd done was gone away separately and answered a bunch of questions from our celebrant, and then just said surprise us on the day of how that kind of comes to fruition. So that was really cool hearing what Ben had sort of written and how she told our story from like our words that were separately sent. We also, my sister did her speech during our ceremony. So rather than like a reading or something like that, I wanted her to speak, but we also wouldn't have had a lot of time later in the day. So we just did it during the ceremony. And it was so special. There was not a dry eye in the house, and she just absolutely nailed it. And it was, yeah, really, really cool. The vows were something that really, we wanted to write our own vows, but I think it surprised me how much they really stood out to me. Like Ben blew me away with the thought and effort that he put into it. Like I'd tucked myself away for a few times, like leading up to the wedding, and really worked on my vows, but I didn't really know what he would do, and he just said the most wonderful words. And I'm so glad I've got copies of like everything that everybody said on our wedding day, because it's the most special thing. Walking down from, so after we had our ceremony, it was kind of some bubbles and things up at that top part of the venue, but then everyone sort of migrated down to the reception area where we had a marquee set up, and some games, and that sort of began like the canapes and cocktail hour, and we had some live music there. And that's like the first time I saw what the setup looked like for the first time, and it just was so cool to see how everything comes to life all together on the day with people. And yeah, I just remember having like little excited squeals, like this is so cool, and just really enjoying that time after the ceremony. We decided to change up our timeline a little bit, and so I think we got married a little bit earlier, and then after our ceremony, we had about 2 hours with guests before we went away with photos. And that was so much fun to be able to kind of enjoy that kind of chit chat time. We were able to have a cocktail and some of the food, and the music was playing. So I think it was really important for us to have that time where we weren't rushed away. Obviously, that depends on where you are and a whole bunch of things. But I think having that background of being a vendor, I was able to roughly know sort of time frames that worked. And like from a photography point of view, shooting later in the day is better for light. So we just kind of worked it around that. I early on messaged Danelle and said, look, what do you think of this kind of timeline? And we sort of collaborated on what would work from her point of view, and working with caterers and things like that. But it was really like really worth doing. I loved it. So yeah, we came back from photos and then was pretty much straight into like speeches and dinner. And the speeches were just, I feel like they're always such a highlight of a wedding. It's where you really get to know like the couples on a super funny level. Usually our bridal parties just blew it out of the water and really nailed it. Our dads both spoke and did really beautiful speeches, but honestly, like we got absolutely roasted for the most part, and it was like this beautiful combination of like taking the piss out of us, but also like the most beautiful words you could ever imagine. So we just loved the speeches, and then following on a really epic dance party, which was kind of, we just love a boogie. And I remember walking away from the dance floor at one point and looking back and seeing like most of the guests on the dance floor. We had an outdoor dance floor under kind of fairy lights with the DJ, and he was so epic. He like absolutely read the room, and it was like this really cool mix of like 80s, but a bit of like a little bit of duff, and just it was so much fun. And our group of friends and things, like it just gets so excited. The boys always request Robbie Williams Angels, and then they all take the tops off and get into a big cuddle. And so that all happened, and it was just a very, very fun time. And we had a bit of a we went back to the venue the day after, for like, we just invited everyone back there and had like a pizza truck and lunch there and a few drinks. But the dance floor was so filthy and like covered in glass.
Oh, so good. It sounds like it was the most epic day. I love hearing all those special moments and so many cool details. You sound like a words girl like me as well. Like really cherish all those special words, and it's cool to have like kept copies
Yeah.
of that. Yeah, it just sounds like everything worked out perfectly. Was there anything that you found difficult about the wedding planning process, or yeah, that you look back on and like regret or would do differently?
I mean, sticking to a budget is really, really hard. And having to, make calls on what you're willing and not willing to kind of compromise on, and remembering how to like what it is, why you're getting married, and what it's about. So that can be a bit challenging. I think I felt lucky that I had some level of savviness with having been um, kind of in the industry. I roughly knew what a photographer would cost and what to allow in a budget for a marquee and things like that. But I was still blown away and surprised about how things really added up. And like we had everything did work out great in the end. And I think anybody would say that about their wedding, but there definitely were hiccups. Like the 2 days before our wedding, it snowed down there, and we hadn't even thought about heating. And so, like on the week of, we suddenly had to pay for heating to bring in gas heaters into the marquee, and we also the forecast was kind of ever changing. We weren't quite sure what was going to happen there, so we last minute were like, shit, let's put the extra extension onto the marquee so that there's space inside if for a dance floor if we can't do it outside. And just little things like that ended up adding up, and we weren't really like anticipating it, so that was a bit challenging. Ultimately, don't regret it. That's the vision we kind of had for the day. I think like in hindsight, if we were going to go into it and really try and save on cost, you would book a venue that had things all inclusive, that you didn't have to like bring in tables, chairs. Like we were like, oh, $12 for a table is all good. But then the linen to put linen on it was really expensive and things like that. We just weren't across. So it's not a regret per se, but it's just that you learn things along the way that you would like then tell people that are getting married and friends and things. Um, but I think the hardest part for me was probably around the dress and kind of the mindset that I had to work on myself. Um, Throughout the wedding process to feel so that I gave myself like the best chance of feeling beautiful on the day. And that was like, yeah, probably the biggest challenge. I had to do some like therapy around body image and like ensure that I was in a really good routine for me leading up to the wedding, where I felt organized going into a week and was moving most days and things like that, just so my mindset was really good, and that I could, yeah, just try and give myself the best chance at feeling pretty. um, but I think, yeah, all of that stuff's quite easier said than done. And I had two best friends getting married. We were all kind of bridesmaids at each other's weddings and getting married around the same time. And I struggled to not compare myself. We're all really different, and yeah, I just had to work on myself so that I wasn't trying to like benchmark myself against them. And that's nothing on them. They're just the most gorgeous, beautiful people. But it did, yeah, bring up some things for me that I wasn't like super confident about, and I had to work on so that it felt good. So lots of learnings throughout that time.
Oh, that's so relatable. I think most women will be nodding away there. And being a bride, especially, like there is this kind of pressure around it, and you are sort of like the center of attention on the day. And yeah, we just all have like hang-ups about the way we look or how we feel in our own body, so that is so relatable. And yeah, that whole comparison piece as well, like there's so much online. And then yeah, I guess, did you ever feel any expectation from being quite a creative person and being in the industry as well, like people were expecting your wedding to look a certain way, or Yeah.
Oh, that's a hard one. I almost think the expectation came from me. Like I'm a bit of a I'm really thankful actually I'm not still in the industry now, because I think maybe that would have been a bit of a thing, but I didn't feel that at all. I haven't been in the industry for a good couple of years, so but it was probably more the expectations that I put on myself. Like I can be, yeah, just a bit of a perfectionist, and I think um, I had to really check in with myself at times to be like, am I doing this for the right like, you know, am I doing this for the right reasons? Do I need this? Do we need to spend the money on this? There were a couple of decisions like that we ended up like not doing some things because I was like, no, I'm being silly, not necessary. There are other things that, like, the accommodation that we stayed at, for example, was like definitely something that wasn't within our budget, but I just really fell in love with it. And I thought if we're ever going to stay somewhere nice, like it should be around our wedding. And so I did some like side hustle freelance work on the side to pay for this accommodation so that we could like stay there and get ready there. And I just thought, oh, it would look so beautiful for photos, and all me and the girlfriends can do a slumber party in this room the night before, and then Ben and I can spend 2 nights here after our wedding. And so there's little things like that yeah, I ended up doing and working a little bit extra so that I could do that. But yeah, I don't know about the pressure thing. Maybe subconsciously.
And did you guys go on honeymoon straight away? You stayed in Wānaka for a bit. I guess everyone was kind of there having a little mini holiday break. But yeah, did you go on honeymoon? What did planning that look like?
Yeah, we I think the day after the wedding we had like a bit of an event, and most people came to that or went and did things in Monaco around that day, and then on the Sunday everybody kind of disembarked and went home, and we just had a chill day on the Sunday. It was my mum's 50th actually that weekend, so we had like a family dinner for her 50th, and then on the Monday we headed to Arrowtown, which is like not a very far drive. We just wanted to do something low key and close that we didn't have to travel very far for. And we, I think, stayed there for 4 days, and we booked um, like some e-bikes and did the little winery route on e-bikes, and had a couple of meals out at some of our favorite places down there, and just kept it pretty low key. It was a really nice time to just be together. We loved reading through like the cards, and like opening gifts, kind of trickled them over those few days. Like we'd do a little bit each day and read like special cards and things like that. We also last minute, Alex, who was our wedding coordinator, they managed to get an audio guest book that like I think was just opening up around the time, and they were like, "Oh, do you want us to bring it along for the wedding?" And so they sent us the audio recordings at that time, and we had so much fun listening to those while we were away on our little honeymoon. Um, but yeah, then we just headed home and kind of got back straight back into work, and we just travelled sort of over winter. We'd been saving to go to Europe. We'd had a trip booked during COVID that we obviously didn't get to go on. And so our intention was always to try and travel again this year or next year. But we just had so many friends. I feel like all of New Zealand evacuated this year and went abroad. And we we just thought it was such a good opportunity to like do that alongside some of our friends as well. So we worked really hard to make that happen. It was a bit. We literally got back from the wedding and we were like, work, so that we could, you know, try and get away for the winter. And yeah, so we just actually got back about a month ago from our, we call it our technical honeymoon, but traveling around Europe, which was just so wonderful.
Amazing. Such a good way to do it. Just have a bit of a relaxed break at home and then, yeah, epic overseas trip a little bit down the track. And can't beat Europe.
I mean, yeah, it's so fortunate to be able to do it. Like it, yeah, it's one of our favorite things to do together is travel, but it is definitely a luxury. And yeah, just feel really lucky we were able to do it this year with friends, and so special.
During the wedding planning process, was there any like helpful websites, apps, resources? I feel like you already had a lot of connections in the industry, but yeah, was there anything else you can think of that was helpful during that journey?
Yeah, I think uh, Alex, our coordinator, shared this amazing just a Google spreadsheet with us when we booked her in, and that kind of became our blueprint for um, kind of planning and budgeting, because it had like a tab for what vendors you'd roughly need to think about booking in, and then it had a budget tab and a timeline tab, and so we just worked from that really to plan that. Like, and I found that really helpful. Inspiration wise, definitely an Instagram person. I probably spend way too much time on there, but I also have bought every single issue of Together Journal since it came out.
And now yours is in it?
Oh, such the weirdest feeling. So cool. But yeah, big fan of that magazine. It's just like the most beautiful curation of stunning events, but also it's so well designed that I just like buy it for my shelf. um, so yeah, super cool. I think like the rise of wedding websites has been a real thing over the last couple of years, like post COVID, and I ended up making my own because I was a bit fussy about like the final how it all looked and things, and I like that's what I do for a job. So yeah, made a wedding website, and then actually kind of sparked an idea to do like that as a little side business thing, which I'm working on at the moment. So hopefully it can come to fruition at some point. But yeah, those I'd say the spreadsheet is probably like our like go-to resource for just like being like, all right, what's next to kind of tick off.
Yeah, Google Sheets or Excel, whatever, it's a popular one. But yeah, having that's so helpful for sure. And maybe if you can talk from sort of your perspective, having been a vendor and then also a bride, if you have any advice that you would give to couples planning their wedding at the moment.
I actually have thought of a few things like, so yeah, that I've written down, and hopefully some of these are helpful for people. But one of the biggest takeaways I think I had from being a photographer, but also have now gone through that process myself, is how important it is to book vendors in that you love and just then trust them to do what they do. I just feel like it alleviates so much worry and stress if you've got great people behind you that you just trust are going to deliver, and that you don't need to micromanage that process. So that is like one of my favorite pieces of advice, because I used to love it when I was a photographer. People booked me because we connected and they might have liked my work at the time, and then they just like trusted you to deliver it. Felt like it just was an awesome way to have a relationship. So that's what we tried to do, and it was a very fun process. One of the other things I'm thankful for in hindsight is around like not leaving things to the last minute necessarily. Like I just I'm very thankful that I was organized in that time leading up to it, that it meant I had brain capacity or space for if any curveballs came in on that final week, like the heating or um, you know, the extension on the marquee or the weather, or we just had the time to sit down and nut it out without stressing over it too much. So I just felt like, yeah, if you can, like everybody's so different, and that's totally fine. But it would be a piece of advice to try and have like most things kind of sussed in that week, so you give yourself the best chance on the wedding week to just enjoy it. There's a little like practical tip I have around timing, or some timing elements, but like I think having a background as a vendor did really help with how to plan out a timeline for the day. And one of those things is like buffer time is your best friend. So some things that I see and heard a lot was like how quickly time flies when